regarding preemptive strikes. Can I strike before the enemy gets a chance to strike me? Or is that unjustified and one should only and exclusively strike in absolute self-defense in response to being attacked? Well, the first thing to know when we talk about the Torah and war is that the Torah hates war. War is terrible and it's not liked. So much of the Torah, although written in a time when war was a way of life for much of the world and the glory was to be a greater warrior, so much of the Torah speaks about the virtue of peace. In fact, the Talmud tells us the entire purpose of the Torah is to bring about peace. We talked about in previous classes how the altar in the temple could not be built using any iron tools because iron was a symbol of war and the temple was about peace. King David, hi Sasha.
Hi.
We talked about King David not being able to build the temple because he had been a man of war, and that's even though he was such a great Jewish king and his wars were all for the right reason. And of course, the ultimate purpose of the Torah, the ultimate goal in Jewish life is the time of the Mashiach, which is a time of universal peace. That's what we hope and that's what we strive for. So the Torah actually hates war, and war is despised. We're not interested in that. Even when there is a war, the Torah teaches us how to go about it, and that's in what some might see as a quite unique way. Rambam Maimonides writes, war should not be waged against anyone until they are offered the opportunity of peace. So before we ever go to war, we should offer a chance for peace to the enemy that we may be waging war against. As Deuteronomy states, when you approach a city to wage war against it, you should propose a peaceful settlement. So the idea is not to go to war and win war. The idea is to win. And war is only when there is no alternative. In fact, even when we're approaching a city to wage war, we should offer them an opportunity to settle for peace. We are also taught the story of Yaakov, of Jacob and his brother Esav. So Yaakov came back to Israel after many years that he had been out of town because he was afraid his brother was going to kill him. And he came back and sent messengers, angels ahead to check out what his brother was up to and if it was safe to return. Well, the angels returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother to Esau, and he's also coming towards you, and 400 men are with him. So you might be hoping for peace, but actually, what's about to happen is war. So the Torah continues. Jacob became frightened and was distressed. So he divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the cattle and the camels into two camps. Jacob was afraid. If I was about to be attacked by 400 men. And Jacob wasn't only afraid, he was distressed. Now, what is that double when we say he was frightened as well as distressed? Not a single word in the Torah can be extra. If he was not only frightened but also distressed, it means something. So Rashi, which is the commentary, we have that here in the gray, Rashi explains, Jacob became frightened and distressed. He was frightened lest he be killed, and he was distressed that he might kill others. So that he was afraid is obvious. He was afraid he might get killed. But he was also distressed because he knew that in the time of war he might need to kill. And that bothered him. He did not like to kill. It was painful for him to entertain the thought that he might need to kill. So we've established that the Torah does not like war. We try to avoid war and always sue for peace. And even when the war takes place, it's a painful and distressing thing. Just before we move on from here, any questions so far? All right, then I guess we all agree. Nobody likes war, and we should try to avoid it. Now, obviously, sometimes there is no choice. Sometimes we'll end up needing to defend ourselves in a war. So when is there no choice? When must there be war? When somebody attacks you. Obviously, when it's necessary to defend yourself against an attack. But how exactly does that work? And this returns us to our original question. Is that only when someone actually attacked you and hurt you, and then you try to push back? Or can I preempt them? Can I attack the other when they are about to attack me? They didn't touch me yet, but they seem like they are ready. Can I get them before they have a chance? Or would the Torah say this is aggressive, unwarranted, unjustified? Do I say, if the enemy is getting close, I will jump and kill them first? Or is that murder? Or perhaps not that bad, but wrong? Well, let's look at this specifically in the scenario of the Jewish people and the people of Israel in 1967 in the Six-Day War. Obviously began with a preemptive strike on the part of Israel that brought about a great ultimate victory. Now, we'll look at this by looking at two video clips. And these are going to give us just really a little taste. The first one giving us a little idea of what Israel was up against and why there was so much fear and a need to act. And the second showing actually what was done. So let's see.
Before June 1967, calls for Israel's annihilation swelled into a hysterical battle cry on the streets of every Arab country in the Middle East. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser stood at the heart of this incitement. A charismatic leader with appeal across the Arab world, Nasser campaigned for Arab unity and for the military destruction of Israel. His blood-curdling speeches were broadcast to every Arab nation, inflaming populations and shaping anti-Israel policy. Israel was a precarious sliver of land along the Mediterranean sand, barely 12 miles wide at her waist, and dwarfed by colossal foes in every direction. Egypt growled to her south, Jordan menaced her eastern border, and Syria rained mortars onto her north. These three nations commanded formidable standing armies and boasted hundreds of modern tanks, aircrafts, and artillery units. Additional Arab countries were prepared to offer varying degrees of commitment to any war against Israel, ranging from symbolic support to actual pilots, planes, tanks, and troops. Foremost among these were Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Algeria, Kuwait, and Lebanon. Behind these loomed a larger foe, the Soviet Union, which armed and advised many of the Arab governments.
So that just gives us a little idea of the buildup that was taking place around Israel. Obviously, we don't have the time right now to get into a history lesson of how that developed from day to day, and it's quite an intricate story of the steps that particularly Egypt took until it seemed to reach the point of no return, the point when war was inevitable. So at that point, what did Israel do? How did Israel respond? How did Israel defend itself from that upcoming war that did not yet break out, but seemed clear that it was about to? Well, for that, we'll move to the next video. And here we go.
Million of Europe's Jews. Israel would have to break the noose on its own, despite being vastly outnumbered and facing enemies at every front. But could it? Desperation is the mother of resourcefulness. Israel's military calculated that the side that struck first had the most realistic chance of winning. They reckoned that surprise and air supremacy were the twin keys to the conflict, and developed a bold but risky plan. At precisely 7:14 a.m. on June 5th, almost every Israeli warplane took off, leaving only 12 behind to protect the country. They flew low across the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, slipping beneath Egyptian radar and under the range of anti-aircraft batteries, and arriving precisely while the enemy pilots were busy with breakfast. In wave after wave, following brilliant strategy, they attacked Egypt's numerous airfields across the length and breadth of the country, returning to Israel to refuel and rearm at the unprecedented speed of just 7 minutes. Israel destroyed the colossal Egyptian Air Force of some 300 planes and disabled its runways and air defenses in just 2 hours. Operation Focus, or Mifta Moket in Hebrew, formally started the 1967 war. But it gave Israel the coveted element of surprise, so that it needed not fight on its enemy's terms. It spared her from the potential loss of her own airfields and from painfully lopsided dogfights in the air. It ripped the carpet from beneath Nasser's feet and prevented him from blitzing Israel's civilians in fulfillment of his apocalyptic pledge to annihilate every last Jew in Israel. Most critically, Israel's preemptive strike enabled its air force to fully support its troops and armored units on the ground, a factor most favorable to the outcome of the war in the furious days that followed.
So that is the story, very brief, how preemptively, before the Egyptians or any other Arab country had fired a shot, the Israelis struck first and turned the tide. Now, this itself is a story of a miracle, and there's a lot to discuss how that actually came together and how they overcame the challenges that would be presented for such an operation. But ultimately, this was successful. And ultimately, this is our question. Was that justified? Would the Torah say it's okay, it's correct, it's perhaps even desirable to jump first, even though nobody did anything to you yet? As a side note, in terms of international law, the UN Charter is somewhat ambiguous about this. The UN Charter specifies that war can only take place in a defensive situation in response to being attacked for the need of self-defense. And there's ongoing legal debate whether that means they need to attack first, or is it okay also to attack preemptively? Something that later decisions by the UN and by international courts have avoided. But for our purposes, what does the Torah actually say? What does the Torah tell us about such a situation? So we know that to go ahead and kill someone is forbidden, even if one's own life is in danger. And what that means is this reading from the Talmud. I hope it's clear. It's a picture, and it doesn't seem to be of the greatest quality, but we have it here. So, a man once came before Rava, one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, with a question, a very pressing concern, and said, "The ruler of my city has told me, go kill so-and-so, and if you do not, I will kill you." So this is a time where the ruler would have actually done that. He says, you go kill Mr. X. If not, I take your head. Can I do it? The so-and-so is just a nice guy, innocent guy, and I'm just stuck in a problem that the ruler is going to kill me. Rava said to him, let him kill you rather than you kill the other. What makes you think that your blood is more red than his? Maybe his blood is redder. So it is not justified to take someone else's life, even to preserve your own life. But of course, in this scenario, the other person was totally innocent and outside of the picture. I can't just go kill somebody down the street to protect myself. That would be wrong. But what about a person who is trying to kill, a attempted murderer? Well, here we have a very important law. If one is pursuing another, this is out of Maimonides, Rambam, quoted straight out of the Talmud. If one is pursuing another with the intention of killing him or her, even if the pursuer is a minor, every Jew is commanded to come to the rescue of the pursued, even if it is necessary to kill the pursuer in order to save the threatened individual. So somebody is pursuing someone else, he's actually trying to kill him or her. And if the one chasing, even if that one is a child, is going to kill someone, we must intervene, save the one who's in danger, even if that means to kill the pursuer. So in other words, if someone is innocent, we can't touch them to save ourselves. But if somebody is involved in a crime, we actually have a mitzvah to even kill that person to prevent him from killing somebody else. That would seem to suggest that even before the murder took place, even before the shot was fired, we kill the one who is trying to fire that shot. That would mean, in our terms, to preemptively strike the enemy is okay and perhaps even a mitzvah. The problem is that this text in and of itself, this example falls a little bit short. Because in that case, to kill the rodef, to kill the one running, the one chasing, the one trying to kill someone else, that one, that the chaser, the rodef, the one running, needs to actually be engaged in the action. Something which is hard to define in terms of a preemptive military strike. When the enemy military is still at home, so to speak, it's hard to say they are already in the middle of the action. What's more so, in terms of a rodef, if you're going to kill that would-be murderer, you can only target him and not any bystanders, and any damage caused along the way would be considered a problem. Whereas in terms of war, and this is a complicated topic for itself, but obviously, unfortunately, if the Israelis bombed the Egyptian airfields, for example, there may have been a janitor or another uninvolved non-soldier that would be killed in the process. Is that justified in a preemptive sense? The law of rodef wouldn't seem to cover that. The law of rodef wouldn't seem to allow attacking the entire scene in order to stop the would-be murder, which may also kill people that are not actually directly involved. So let's look at another text and try to answer our question. This is again from Rambam Maimonides, the law in the laws of kings, which includes the laws of battles, laws of war. What is considered an obligatory war? What kind of war is a mitzvah? Which sounds strange, but there's such a thing. A war to defend the Jewish community against an enemy that comes to attack them. So, if there's a Jewish town, a Jewish community, a Jewish country in this case, and the enemy is coming to attack them, it is a mitzvah to wage war. Now, of course, this doesn't tell us at what point it's okay to get involved and at what point is okay to attack. Is it okay to do so preemptively? Is it okay to do so first? Well, let's look at a very interesting law. This is straight out of the Talmud. If Gentiles besiege Jewish cities, so the non-Jews come, the enemy comes from somewhere else, and they surround the Jewish city. We do not initiate a military offensive against them, nor do we desecrate the Shabbat to prepare a defense. So it's Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't use weapons, we don't go to war, we don't do any of these things. So the Gentiles have shown up, but we don't attack them on Shabbos. This rule applies if the enemy's goal is solely monetary. If all they want is to steal from us, we cannot attack them on Shabbos to protect those financial interests. If, however, they threaten lives, well, when lives are in danger, the whole story changes. In that case, we initiate a military offensive against them and we desecrate the Shabbat if necessary. So, and Gentiles have come, surrounded the Jewish city. We initiate war against them, even if they did not fire yet, and even if that's Shabbat, as long as lives are in danger. Now comes the punchline. If the city abuts the border, even if the enemy does not seek to take any lives, rather they only want to plunder straw and hay, we initiate a military offensive, even if this entails desecrating the shops. So, if it's a regular town, well, a regular town, it needs to be a danger to life. But if the city is on the border, we're more strict about it. Even if the enemy only wants to steal from us, we attack them even on Shabbos. And the reason for that is as soon as they break through the border, they may have come for straw and hay, but the border is now open and the entire nation is in danger. So we take initiative to prevent that from happening. This is a contemporary Rabbi Bleich who deals with a lot of modern day questions in halacha, summarizing what we would learn from this Talmud. The Gemara, the Talmud, sanctions defensive action on the Shabbos as well as on weekdays against heathens who besiege the border settlement, even though the marauding forces seek only straw and hay, i.e., they are intent only upon looting or exacting economic concessions. It is clear that in such situations there exists no imminent danger. It is not at all certain that any life will be endangered. All they want is money. There is, however, reason to fear that even if the aggressor's immediate pecuniary or economic goals are achieved without resistance, having penetrated border defenses, the enemy may engage in warfare at some future time and thereby endanger Jewish lives. The loss of fortified border settlements would leave the entire country exposed and defenseless. Hence, defensive measures are warranted. So he's proving from this passage of the Talmud that it's possible to justify and, in fact, and even to necessitate going to war before being attacked. Because if the enemy is coming only for cash, only for straw and hay, only for something small, but it's on the border, we can't allow a situation, the border will be left open. We can't allow a situation where there will be danger from here going forward. So even though they did not attack us yet, we attack them to prevent that. Nothing says that more clearly than this Talmudic statement. The Torah instructs us, if one is coming to kill you, rise up to kill him first. If one is coming to kill you, rise up to kill him first. Not if one already killed, then it's too late. If one is coming to kill you, rise up to kill him first in self-defense. Clearly sanctioning the idea of a preemptive strike if that is necessary. Let's analyze this a little bit further. This is just to illustrate, it's a picture actually from the 6-Day War. But if one is coming to kill you, rise up to kill him first. Look at that two. Rise up to kill him first. The Talmud does not say rise up and kill him first, which would be the proper way to say it. Someone's coming to kill you, jump and get him first. Talmud says rise up to kill him first. And that indicates, interestingly, that if we show strength, we show willingness, we show the ability, we show that we are prepared to kill the enemy first, we might not even need to do it. They'll learn not to show up to begin with. And that would be the goal. Rise up and kill him first. Yes, if someone comes to kill you, jump first. But when you establish that policy, when you rise up to kill him first, you won't even need to kill him. They'll learn not to engage. They will learn, as some of the Arab countries ultimately did, that this is not a good idea and war will be prevented to begin with. So in summation, we ran through a lot of different Talmudic texts, but in short, we're trying to find the source, whether it is okay in a situation of danger to preemptively strike. And after some struggles trying to prove that, we were able to prove that from the Talmudic discussion of a town on the border where we go to war even if the enemy only wants to take our money because of what might happen later. And especially from the Talmudic statement which says, rise up to kill him first so that you will not be killed. Clearly indicating that when all these forces massed in Israel's borders with the stated intention of wiping Israel out, God forbid, yes, we should rise and kill them first. And as we've noticed, when you rise up to kill first, sometimes that can be avoided. And of course, our ultimate goal and ultimate hope is to live in the world without any war, to live in the world of peace, to live in the world of goodness, which is a world where God's presence is felt, the world in the time of the Mashiach, the world that we're hoping for, working towards throughout Jewish history, and we are getting very close, thank God. And on that note, I want to let you know that next week, Thursday, we will begin a course. We'll go for 5 weeks talking about the Mashiach. What do the Jewish people actually believe when we talk about the coming of the Mashiach and the coming of Mashiach and better times and a better future and a better world? What does the Torah really say about it? What do we really expect to happen? How is it going to happen? Why will it happen? When will it happen? We have a lot to discuss. We'll break it into 5 units, talk about over 5 Thursdays from next week, almost till the new year, till Rosh Hashanah. So we've had our fill of talking about war. We get to talk about peace and better things, the time of the Mashiach. That will be starting on Thursday, same place, same time, 8 o'clock on this Zoom and on the same Facebook channel if you're watching there, or YouTube channel. Meanwhile, before we get there, on Monday, we will have a class as usual, but this time we'll have a special presentation about the life of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the father of the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, who died on that day. This is his Yortzeit. He died in exile after the Soviets had enough of his efforts to keep Judaism alive during the 30s and 40s in the Soviet Union. So we will talk about his legacy and what that can teach us today. A little bit of a historic and quite fascinating discussion for Monday. In the meantime, we're going to end the live stream and we'll take any questions or